And we are
The,
officially
we-
broadcasting.
the webinar is live. Gosh.
Hello,
Whew.
hello, everybody.
How many people are still in lockdown? How many people? Let us know. Let us know in the comments.
How many
Most
people are
importantly,
not?
yeah, how many people, yeah, or not? That's good. That's a good point. Pop
Casey,
up the
I'm
little
on
chat
a
button
emotional
here.
lockdown right now.
You know what? It's okay. My wife is a prisoner. She tells me all the time, so probably very similar. It's all good. She's actually going to be running a half marathon. She signed up for the Yosemite, I think it's Yosemite half marathon. She's going up there with a gaggle of women, little group from the CrossFit box and other locals here from Ramona. They're going to go up, and she just decided on a lark. You know what? I'm going up anyway. I might as well run this half marathon. And it was so funny because she's in good shape, but she doesn't not a runner. But she downloaded an app last night that kind of like for me it would be like a couch to 100 meters, but it was like a couch to half marathon kind of app. And she put the date that she has to be ready for, and it popped up a message that says, "Whoa, Philly, this is a very, that's a very small time frame for you to get in all this. Are you sure you want to do this?" It was
What's the time frame?
hilarious.
How long does she have?
Oh, it's like first week of May.
Oh,
First week
wow,
of May.
that's
So it's
quick.
close. It's very close. Yeah.
Yep, it's very quick.
Brunswick, Georgia.
Got
Good to see you,
Netherlands,
Brooke. Look at that.
Australia.
Brunswick. Oh, for anyone in Canada on the call yet? Let me see that. Half marathons are fun. Amy, we're not going to be friends. Period. No. They even used to have the rock and roll marathon here in San Diego. Of course, we can't have it now, but we will eventually have it again. And the good thing about the rock and roll marathon is that there was a band every mile, and you got to see a band every mile, which was cool, and that nice and entertaining. But my idea of a race is like the beer mile, where you run a lap, you drink a beer, you run another lap, you drink a beer. That's to me.
I would probably throw up on
how
that.
it should be good. That's good. Or the donut
Arson,
5K.
Yeah.
If it was kombucha, Arson would be in.
Yeah, Megan
Right,
knows me so well.
right.
If there's bacon or candy corn, Lisa
at
from
the finish
Minneapolis. Brooke says she's not living in Canada. My daughter and I are Canadian. So Brooke, ask your daughter about this incredible conspiracy involving butter in Canada that's going on right now, because I just read it today. Apparently they've added an increased amount of palm oils, and now everyone is up in arms. And I'm not even talking about residents. I'm talking food bloggers and restaurants saying that they can taste our butter is harder. There's literally whole articles about how the butter is now harder in Canada based upon some change
Do
in
you have like
production.
a Google alert set up for anything that's bacon or butter or grease?
Look, I've said too much, okay? Some people have Google alerts for their name. I have Google alerts for bacon, butter, pork fat,
bacon,
things
butter.
like that. It's fine. I just saw it today. It was really cool. It popped up. I'm like, wow, that is really interesting. The butter is not spreading as well as it used to. I mean, that's clearly, that's an important issue, obviously.
It's not due to like freezing temperatures or
that's what I thought. But as I was reading the article, they said, no, we've let the butter come. These people are letting their butter come to room temperature, and they're noticing that it's just not the same. So there you go.
Wait,
Buttergate.
But isn't the temperature in Canada like 60 degrees?
Buttergate. Good job, Sandra. It's going to be good.
Awesome. Well, as everyone's continues to roll in, we're going to go ahead and get started on our 8th episode of SEO for Publishers. Today, we're going to be debunking SEO myths, thank goodness, with experts Casey Marquis, Arsen Rabinovich, and Andrew Wilder. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. As always, we're going to have Q&A at the end, so please feel free to drop any and all questions in the Q&A section. You do not have to wait till the end. As you think of a question, or if we're on a specific myth and you want us to dive in a little bit more, head on over to the Q&A. We'll either tackle it right then and there, or we'll do it at the end. We also always publish a replay of the episode along with any Q&As, whether or not they were answered next week. So all of you who joined are going to get emailed a link to the replay next week, as well as last week's episode, or last month's episode. So today's episode is going to be a little bit unique. Since we're going to be debunking SEO myths, we're going to do this as kind of like a true or false statement and let the experts let us know whether this very common SEO myth is actually true or it's a myth. So Andrew, kick us off, please. True or false? Is adding keywords into headings overkill? Or can it lead to over-optimization issues via the core update suppression?
True-ish.
I think that works.
It depends.
We're going to have a lot of it depends.
That's the first one for
Every
today.
time you hear the word "it depends" today, folks, take a drink. You are welcome.
To start keeping count.
So that's what we're gonna play: true, false, or it depends, right?
That's two.
So it's okay to add some keywords into your headings, but you don't want to overdo it. That's the most important thing. There were a lot of sites that got hit last year. 2 years ago, I've lost track of all time.
November 2019.
Wow. Okay. November of 2 years ago, because they were over optimizing. So if you have, let's say 9 or 10 headings in your post, and every single one of them has some variation of your keyword, you're over optimizing. So that can lead to a penalty. So like with most things, if it works naturally and it would make sense if you were just reading out loud to a fellow actual human being, then it's probably okay.
Is there any, and this is a little bit separate from the true or false, but is there any tool or anything that you can like run a heading through to see if it's over optimized, or is the best way to really just like kind of say it out loud and make sure it's natural?
I would just read through it, but I think Casey has a browser extension that he likes to use, and the name escapes me.
SEO Quake.
SEO Quake, thank you.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and paste it over here again. Really easy to use. It just pulls all your headings off the page. Good way to see the breakdown right there. You'll know just visually looking at it. If I can see my keyword in every heading, probably not the best.
And that also gives you a list of like the actual hierarchy of H1, H2, H3, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So you can see if you're nesting them properly, because you want to make sure you're going in a logical order with those.
Nice. Perfect. Okay. So first, true-ish / it depends. Arson, you're up next. True or false? You can't rank for more than one keyword per blog post.
False. Definitely false. You should be ranking for more than one keyword per blog post. If you're only ranking one keyword for a blog post, you didn't do a really good job on that blog post. The point is that you will have a primary keyword, right? Because that's the topic. So if you're writing about potato soup, Gary, if you're writing about potato soup, you're obviously covering the topic of potato soup, and then you'll have things like questions in your article that somebody might be asking, like which temperature to cook the potato soup, or how do you store the potato soup. So all of these are variations of keywords that you will be ranking for. So absolutely false.
Okay. Casey, true or false? You should only be putting content under one category. One piece of content cannot go into multiple different kind of categories.
Yeah, absolutely false. Not remotely, no hedging, no, it depends. I get it. A lot of people argue that we want to have really clear topical silos. You want to only put one recipe or post in one category, but frankly, it's just not great for users, and it's really not going to provide you some kind of magical benefit long term. The belief is that if you don't perfectly silo these category pages, you'll have some kind of intensive content cannibalization or topical dilution. And in our experience, and I know that Arson's going to say the same thing, we just don't see it a ton. On the contrary, you should catalyze your categories whenever it makes sense for users. So if you want to put it in more than one category, that's fine. Using some quick examples, if we had something like fried chicken, we might have that post in chicken, in a chicken category, an entrees category, a paleo category, main dishes. If we were using pumpkin pie, we might have it in desserts, pies, Thanksgiving, keto. Totally okay. The bottom line goal is to fill out the category pages with quality information. And you do that by making sure that we have nice, clear, above the fold archive headlines, that we have nice on-page H1s, that we have archive introductory text, that we have custom page titles and descriptions that we're linking to these category pages. But no, if someone is advising you that, oh my gosh, no, you're screwing up things here by only having, you need to have your one recipe or whatever in one category. No, very poor advice.
Yeah, and I'd like to add to that. So definitely do not use just one category. You want to use categories that are relevant to the topic that you're covering. And a lot of blogs are set up to have multiple categories, everything from preparation method to primary ingredient to type of meal and so on and so forth. As long as they're relevant, as long as they make sense, use those categories. Don't go crazy. Don't treat your categories like tags. Don't create like useless categories. Try to look at your categories as what is the top level term or the broader term that this particular post or topic can qualify into. So don't just look at your categories from a standpoint of I'm going to organize this logically because this is a soup, I'm going to put it in soup. Look at it from a standpoint of, is this a top level query? Does this category support this query? If somebody searches for a broader version of this topic, like somebody searches for different types of potato soup, right? Your category, your potato soup category page should rank. It's also a discovery mechanism. So the more opportunity you give your content to be discovered, the better your content will perform.
Again, I know we've got a lot of questions to cover, but I also want to specify that the only time that you really are going to run into duplicate content issues with categories is if you've made a mistake setting up your permalinks. So if you've gone in previously and you've accidentally put category name in your permalinks and you start adding a post to different categories, you're generating multiple versions of that URL. One of them will say, you know, your site bread post, recipe post, your site Thanksgiving recipe post. We don't want that to happen. So so make sure that you check that. That's just a simple auditing best practice. We want to make sure that we don't have categories as a parameter in your permalinks. That way you don't have to worry when you put the same post in multiple categories, which again, just fine.
Okay, perfect. Arsen, is it true that including a target keyword in anchor text has no SEO benefit?
It depends. I'm guilty. I'm adding another one. We're up to we're on our fourth one.
Do another
It
check
depends.
mark.
Right. So let's talk about what the anchor text is. Anchor text tells the user or gives the user a hint of what they should expect when they click on this link, right? It's the description of where the person is going to land once they click the link. For SEO purposes, it's a double-edged sword, right? So you do want to contextualize for Google that this link takes you to a page that talks about XYZ, right? So you want to make sure that that kind of is in there. But because of people like me and other SEOs who have abused how Google treats anchor text, Google has figured out that we've been using that to manipulate the algorithm. So they've put less weight on the anchor text and the value of what that passes, that the contextualization that it passes to the page that you're linking to. So you definitely, I'm not going to say that it doesn't bring any value if you add a keyword. It definitely does, and we've tested this and it works. You just shouldn't overdo it, right? You shouldn't oversaturate, because once you oversaturate to Google, especially with certain algorithms like Penguin, it will seem like you're trying to over-optimize. So the same kind of strategy approach should be taken with your headings to also your anchor text. Now, there's also a big difference between anchor text for external links or incoming links from other sites, and then there's internal links. So you can get pretty creative with internal linking, and you shouldn't be afraid of over-optimizing the internal linking anchor text. And it also should be, again, it should be used for the user, right? Contextualize, tell the user where they're going. Don't just stuff keywords in there. Everything is good in moderation, but it definitely does help SEO to have keyword. So we call this exact match or partial match on the anchor text.
Perfect. And just to let everybody know, over on Twitter, we are, every question or every myth, we're debunking whether it's true or false. So if you're forgetting if the second one was true or false, you can head over to Twitter. The link is there and you'll get to see if it's true or false, or it depends. Next one, Andrew, really, really popular one. So many people enter this as they registered. Is word count a ranking factor or not?
Not. Word count is not.
Perfect.
Yeah, false. Word count is not a ranking factor.
Move on. Nothing else to say. Good to go.
Moving on.
No, John Mueller has definitively said this. Casey was kind enough to send me a link on Reddit where he literally says, and I quote, "Word count is not a ranking factor. Save yourself the trouble. So does that mean word count doesn't matter? Not necessarily, but it is not a ranking factor. So, once again, you want to be doing what's right for your readers. So longer is better if you need more words to explain or answer the question. Shorter is better if you can be more efficient. The intent of the search query is important, right? If somebody's searching for something and you have this really long thing because you're trying to cover all the bases, but that's too much, that might backfire on you, and vice versa. So, some queries don't require a big in-depth answer. So if you can get the searcher the answer they want in an efficient way, I think that's the way to think about it.
Right. And I would just add very quickly to that is that this is not something that you should ever worry about with regards to whether it's true or false. I mean, Google has said like 4 times, word count is not something that you should lose much sleep over. You always want to write to the query. Some queries can be answered very quickly. Some queries take longer to do. And one of the things that you want to do is, I know many of you on the call are using key search. Congratulations, very smart of you. If you're using key search, you should be using a tool called the Content Assistant Tutorial, the Content Assistant, which is built into key search. And that's going to allow you to actually see what's ranking in Google for that query and actually show you the word count, the breakdown for that query. So you can get an idea. If you know that the average ranking on the top 10 or 15 results is 570 words, then you writing 1,300 words is not going to help you.
Right.
Might hurt you. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that you're understanding the intent and what is actually showing in the search result for that word count, and then you can adjust accordingly. But yeah, just you're good to go, guys. Don't worry. Don't get too hung up on word count or believe that you need to write to a word count.
And then also the Casey touched on intent. Keep in mind that not all queries require scholarly articles that are thousands of words long to answer the question or to satisfy its intent. And I've talked about this before. If I'm looking for a perfect temperature to grill my steak, I'm going to get that piece of information. I'm going to be out, right? I don't need to read through 500 words or 600 or 700 words about how you discovered this recipe on your self-discovery journey in Costa Rica. I just need the temperature, right? So approach it from a standpoint of what's ranking. Always check what's ranking in Google, what Google is selecting as the type of content piece to satisfy that query and its intent. And then you'll have your answer, whether you should be writing a long post or you should be writing a short post or should be a list post or whatever.
And I think when it comes to word count too, a lot of what people think about is long form content, and that's when word count's gonna matter. But we did have a couple questions about word count minimum. I know it's not really a true or false, but is there a at least 100 words should be on a page? Is there some kind of minimum that publishers should have per post or even on just a regular page, or does that not even matter?
We can tell you exactly what Google has said, which is that there isn't one. That they have never published a minimum word count ever. It's not in their guidelines. It's not in a seminar,
anywhere,
a webinar, anywhere that I've ever said. It's just sometimes you can have it, if maybe it's a short, like I always use the example, if you go to Google and type, is it Christmas? The top result is a site, isitchristmas.com. And if you go to that site, it's a one-word answer, no, because that's perfectly fulfills the user intent of that query. So again, it just depends upon the query. It depends upon what you're doing with regards to that content. This is why that tool that I shared here from Key Search is going to be so helpful for a lot of you, because it'll take the guesswork out of. If you're trying to target a recipe, if you're trying to target a query, and you see that the average word count of the content that's being returned on the first couple of pages is this, maybe we need to try to focus on getting near there, or maybe a little bit more, to make sure that we're kind of hitting the focal point, so to speak.
Gotcha. And Casey, we all know that content is king and technically queen, but is it true that it's the only thing that you should really focus on when it comes to improving your ranking?
Not remotely true. That's definitely a myth. Content used to be king. I would say in many cases it's more the servant these days, because what is more important than content is how you're presenting the content. Does it load fast? Is there barriers in place preventing the user from interacting with the content? When we're talking about when that quote came out to be, and I know a lot of you probably were not even born when that happened, but it was in 1996, for those of you young people on the call, that when Bill Gates said this initially, that was in the good old days when we only had 3 ways to check content. We had to ask our mom, we had to go to the library, or I had to pull down my copy of the Encyclopedia Britannica. That's what we were looking for when we were looking at content, those kind of days. So understand that things have changed a lot since then. Instead, what we're focusing on is we want to focus on context. We want to focus on social media. We want to focus on our audience to drive the signals. And we want to make sure that technically our content is presented in a way that is as attractive to the user as possible. It loads fast. It's not covered by ads or intrusive interstitials. That's a big one. And we just want to make sure that it's a high quality experience for users.
Which ultimately is always the thing to do, is provide a high quality experience for users. Arson, is it true that duplicate content is okay as long as you cite the original content source?
False. Duplicate content is not okay. Well, okay, so duplicate content is there's two types of duplicate content, right? There's external duplicate content. So like, let's say Casey publishes a post and then I decide that I'm going to copy it word for word and publish it on my site, right? When that happens, search engines can be a little bit confused, right? Because they're not going to want to rank both of our posts to satisfy that query, right? As a result, very rarely you'll see the same exact piece of content rank for a query unless Google has a hard time finding other documents on the web to satisfy that search. So search engines will get a little bit confused about like which one of our posts should be included in the index, right? And then they have to rely on secondary signals to figure that out, right? And that's where like authority, expertise, trust, links, and all of that comes in. So you definitely want to control and be aware of who's republishing your content, because let's say my site is much more authoritative than Casey's, and I take his content and I publish it, most likely I will rank higher than Casey with that piece of content, even though he was the first one to publish it. But at the same time, Google is becoming much better understanding where things are and how they are. So duplicate content can still mess you up pretty bad, especially if it's cross-domain. And we've had clients come to us with these issues, and we've had to basically take down notices and all of that stuff to get a handle on it. And if it gets out of control, so it's I would say that false, that you should definitely be aware of duplicate. Now, duplicate content on your own site, within your domain, is a different story, right? So
shared content, yeah.
Right. That's a different story. I wouldn't be too concerned about that. I would be more concerned about cross-domain duplication.
We had a question here, Ashley, if you could, and I know let's get at Arson's opinion on that. Someone, I think Christian says, what about pieces of the content, like if you change 50% of the content and republish it?
So, back in the day, back in the good old days, we used to be able to do this. We used to be able to take a piece of content and send it through like a keyword or a word spinner or a paragraph or even a sentence spinner and create unique variations. Google is becoming much better and again, contextualizing and understanding what the content is about. So content that covers the topic in a very similar way will still have a hard time ranking. So if somebody wrote a piece of content and you republish it, or you rewrite it and republish it, you might rank above them. You might rank depending on how much of uniqueness you include in there, right? So it's a weird question to say true or false, but you should always keep a handle on top of, like, some of our larger clients we run copyscape reports for very frequently to make sure that nobody else is trying to thieve and capitalize on their content.
And that was Copyscape you mentioned? Okay, perfect.
There's plenty of other tools, but we're just comfortable with Copyscape.
Okay. And Casey, is it true that only publishers who have a specific niche or specialize in a unique topic can rank successfully as a publisher?
Myth. Absolutely. I hear this a lot. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're not doing well because you haven't niched down, or, if you're going to really be successful long term, you have to niche down. Well, there is some truth to that, but it's not a hard and fast rule. And I've literally, after you've done as many audits as I've done, you see all these examples in real life. A couple that spring to mind, big sites that many of you on the call know. Many of you are familiar with Michelle of Brown Eyed Baker. When Michelle started her site years ago, she focused exclusively on desserts. And then she expanded away from desserts, and she now has hundreds of recipes covering dozens of different topics, and they all rank well. That's very common, where you might want to start initially with a smaller niche, but then you expand out as you build authority both for yourself and your site. An even better example is a site like Spin with Pennies. I think many of you know Spin with Pennies. It's a very successful site. I've been working with them for years. They started in the money saving and budgeting niche. You would never know that looking at their site. It is literally 100% recipes now. And they did 14 plus million sessions from Google over the last month. So that's the kind of thing I really want you to understand, because this is very common. I hear this kind of bullshit advice from publishers and from other SEO courses and even from ad companies all the time. Niche down, niche down, niche down. It's the quality of the content. It's the quality and experience of the publisher, of you, the distributor of the content, that really goes hand in hand into doing well. Just like these bloggers did historically, you too can have that kind of similar success. It's all about bottom line quality with the content you're publishing. We have plenty of current clients who do it yourself recipes, parenting advice. We've got some clients that do recipes, home improvement, some clients who just do home improvement and craft tutorials. There's always multiple niches, and it's really the bottom line quality of each niche is where you should focus your attention.
Got it. Okay. And Andrew, is it true that ingredients and recipe instructions should only be included in the recipe card and not the blog post itself?
It depends. But basically, yes. Don't repeat yourself, right? If you're just going to have a list of ingredients in a recipe card and then just cut and paste a whole block of ingredients in the blog post, like what's the point? You're not adding value there, right? So, if you think you're doing that to make your post longer, then maybe put something of value in there. And I know you have to make your post a certain length to have enough ad units to make your money. Like, I get it. But maybe you can talk about the ingredients instead, or, how to source them. Like if there's a particularly challenging ingredient to find, or something that's less common or whatever, you can talk about the history of that ingredient, or you can give some more backstory and information that's useful to the reader. But yeah, I don't see any benefit at all to repeating yourself, and you might just annoy your readers because they're like, well, I just read that, and why is that there? So
yeah, as a user, one of my favorite things in a recipe, instead of doing all of the steps again and then it's in the recipe card, is I've seen a lot of food bloggers take different ingredients. So if you don't have this at home, you can try this. And then they use that as a way to add more content instead of duplicating the instructions or the ingredients.
And that's super helpful, because if you're, looking in your pantry to find something, if you get a thumbs up on an ingredient swap that has been tested by the blogger, then that's super helpful, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep. 100%. Arsen, are recipe ratings and comments ranking factors, or are they not?
No, they're definitely not. False. Okay, halfway true and false.
Are you not saying the magic words?
It depends. We're up to 6 now. Okay, so ratings, not necessarily. Ratings give you that really awesome featured snippet, not featured. Oh my god, I'm brain farting.
Rich snippet.
Rich snippet. Here you go. Rich snippet. Give you a rich snippet, which helps with like click-through rates and all the good stuff. And that in turn kind of like whatever maybe helps with SEO if you're getting nice click-through rates, and Google uses that long click model to see if people are finding your content useful and all of that stuff. So I would say yes. As far as click-through rates, definitely. Comments are treated by Google as a part of like the main area of your content, the main block of text. I'm gonna copy paste a thing from Google on a SEO roundtable where John Mueller talks about this. So basically, comments are looked at by Google as a part of the main body of the page of the article. Now, Google does, according to them, does look at that content and evaluate it as UGC, user-generated content. So I would probably believe that it's scored a little bit differently if your theme is properly coded, will not be a cause for like dilution of topical focus if your comments go like completely haywire and off topic, right? So I definitely believe that Google does evaluate comments. I don't think saying that like, oh, I have like 100 comments and this person has 20 comments, it should be ranking higher than them. I don't think that's the factor, the number of comments, but Google does look at the comments. So I would believe that they do make some sort of determinations on the overall quality and relevance of your post based on the comments that they're crawling through.
Gotcha. So it may not be a direct ranking factor, but may have an influence.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense. Speaking of additional ranking factors, Casey, are guided recipes ranking factors?
Myth, not remotely true. This is going to be a good one. Guided recipes were launched in May 2020 as a way for recipe publishers to try to optimize better for Google Assistant at the time. Google Assistant was an app directory, and it was a way for Google to start piggybacking on the ability to show content specifically for what we call headless devices or smart displays, things like Google Nest and other devices of that nature. The issue is that since Google has published their initial notice about guided recipes back in May of 2020, do you know how many other times they've referenced guided recipes since? 0. They've launched no public statements. They've talked about no other ways that they plan to push out information on guided recipes. It just doesn't exist. But here's what we do know from what they have published. There are no carousels for guided recipes. There's no way to monetize guided recipes traffic. And there's really no way to know exactly how much guided recipes traffic you're going to get. We can't track that in Search Console, and we certainly can't track it in Google Analytics. And we would know that because if you go into Google Analytics, you have a big tab called Behavior. And if you go under Behavior, you can sort by technology. You can also sort by mobile. And that's really where you can see all the devices that are accessing your site at the time. You'll probably find more traffic from Opera or the Nintendo browser than you will from Google Assistant. And I couldn't even find a notice in the sites that I looked at this week that would even show me that they were getting any reference or with regards to Google Assistant traffic or whatever, guided recipes. If you want to use guided recipes, fantastic, but don't believe that it's going to increase your bottom line traffic. Understand that there is a lot involved in making these work fully, like including recipe photos in your recipe cards if you want to be able to provide that as on a headless browser. Make sure that you survey your audience, because when we've surveyed our audience, when we've run Crazy Egg, or when we've had residents, bloggers actually do a blogger survey, or we've even conducted focus groups, people tell me all the time they hate process shots in recipe cards. Many of them unconsciously do not want to print out the recipe card because they think they'll print out the pictures. So whenever possible, that's why I always recommend that we put the process shots in the recipe post and not the recipe card. Now, you can experiment with that. You always want to cater to the needs of your audience. So do not follow a blogger who's telling you that you need to do this until you've surveyed your audience. Do not follow an ad company telling you, oh, you absolutely want to put photos in your recipe cards because this will make it longer and we can stuff more ads. That's not a user-first approach. So that's the kind of things I really need you to start thinking of intuitively here. Ask these questions, but the bottom line is guided recipes is not now, nor has it ever been a ranking factor. If you do not want to do guided recipes, it will not hurt you algorithmically. There are no carousels. There is nothing that you're missing out on.
Okay, that makes sense. Arsen, is guest blogging a complete waste of time and doesn't really result in any like SEO boost, or is guest blogging worth the time?
False. Well, you kind of, that question was framed.
Yeah, it was
weirdly.
more of a
You can't,
question.
Right.
So is it true it's a waste of time?
It's not a waste of time if you're doing it properly. So there's a lot of misconceptions about guest blogging, right? So if you're doing guest blogging the way it's supposed to be done, when you're a guest author on somebody's site and you have an author profile and you have a byline in the article with a link to your author profile on that site and a link to your social media properties and all of that, that will definitely work, and it will help with expertise, authority,
I
Trust.
have, again, if I have an author profile on AmazingRibs.com or, Bacon Me Crazy and some of these other really awesome sites, and I'm talking about my love for bacon, hey,
Right.
that might help me as
Right.
an author, but yeah, it's going to have limited pull
Right.
otherwise.
So it's going to help with for you as an author, but you also, Google does look at the links that are, so like in the byline at the bottom of an article. So let's say you publish an article and you have a byline, so there's a link to your like site or your whatever. So that will pass, we believe, some authority. It's not a part of the main article. It's not within context of the article. It's just it's a link, right? It's just like having a link from like your Facebook page, right, or from your Twitter profile. So I don't think that it's a waste of time in the grand scheme of things, but for it to be like, this is my link building strategy, definitely I wouldn't put all my eggs in that basket.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. Andrew, is it true that bad HTML validation doesn't hurt rankings, but it can impact structured data?
True.
Finally, a true one.
Yay. I'm going to throw a caveat in there, though. Just because, so basically the question is, if HTML validates, like you can run your HTML through a validator tool and it'll say, yes, this HTML is valid, or no, it's not. But browsers are smarter than that and they can handle invalid HTML to a point. So it depends on what the invalidity is. If you have bad HTML that corrupts your page and users can't see it and Google can't crawl it, that's going to hurt your rankings, right? But if the page has one little typo that doesn't really impact anything realistically, but it doesn't pass the validation, that won't hurt your ranking factor.
Okay, that makes sense. And Arson, is having high quality outbound links, or okay, let me rephrase that. Does having high quality outbound links hurt your link juice?
Okay, so let's talk about that really ugly word, link juice. There's no such thing as link juice. It's not a fluid. It's not even a gas or a solid. So look, no, you don't leak link juice to just because you're linking out, right? So if it makes sense, if you're putting together a piece of content and you need to reference or cite another blog or a research paper or whatever have you, whatever helps the user gain the knowledge that they're looking for, right? Whatever helps satisfy the primary and secondary intent of that query, of the reason why the person came to your site. If it's a part of your document and you're saying, like I'm writing about topic XYZ, as a part of my explanation, I'm going to reference Wikipedia, right? So that you can learn more about whatever I'm referencing, right? That's helpful to the user. Google is never going to ding you for that. Google is never going to diminish the value of your page because you're linking out. As a matter of fact, we believe that it's a reverse of that, right? Now we want to include links we want to link out to authoritative sites. And there's some talks about, like, is it too much if we were doing it too much? Like, are we overdoing it, right? So definitely false. Don't be afraid to link out as long as it makes sense, as long as you're helping the user gain valuable information as it relates to the topic that you're covering.
Okay. Casey, is it true that Google doesn't like syndicated content because it isn't authentic content?
Myth. Not remotely true. John Mueller said back in 2019 that syndicated content can outrank regular content. I'll paste over the citation here in a minute, but we've known this for a long time. If a lot of bloggers, especially about 2017, 2018, would contact me for audits, they would say, Casey, I have my top recipe has just started to fall, or I can't understand why this other site is outranking me. Or they've republished their site. This was a big deal with the Huffington Post previously. They don't do it as much anymore. But the Huffington Post, we'd have all these recipe contributors go to the Huffington Post, and they would republish their top recipes on the Huffington Post. And what do you think happened? The Huffington Post outranked them for their own recipes. And it wasn't until I kind of educated these bloggers that we never take our best content and reprint them on a site that's so much stronger than us, because that's a confusing signal to Google. And they can sometimes do exactly what they did in many cases, which was determine that the Huffington Post reprinted version was the original canonical, and we don't want to do that. So the thing is that if you want to do syndicated content, it doesn't matter whether or not it's authentic. It matters whether or not you're doing it correctly. You can actually garner a lot of traffic from syndicated content, but you have to understand that there's a trade-off. You're doing it because you're trying to garner increased visibility, social signals, or maybe some links back to your own content. Whenever possible for syndicated content, we should be using what's called the canonical tag, which tells Google, hey, this is just a copy. Come back here and find the original. Now, a lot of bloggers still struggle with this because they're either shy and they don't want to require that this person use the canonical tag, or they're just uneducated and they don't know the canonical tag exists. So just something to be aware of. We want to make sure that the site that you're syndicating content to is of value to your audience, but if it's stronger than you are, understand that there are risks there. Go ahead and
So
paste
as
over these links
always,
for you.
outweighing the value to the audience once
Yeah.
again.
Always, definitely.
Andrew, is it true that adding a Google web story will help rank a blog post?
Okay, so I don't know a definitive answer on this, so I'm going to take a guess and then let Casey and Arson tell me if I'm right or wrong. No, it won't help. Yes or no? Is that right, guys?
We're gonna let you hang on. We're gonna let you struggle on this one.
We're gonna let it simmer for a second.
Oh, so you don't know either is the answer then. Okay, great.
It's too early. I mean, it's too early to say anything, right? Because like they did what? It's been only like what, a handful of months, right?
I would say, if it's my opinion, I would say absolutely not, because number one, these Google web stories can really decimate on-page metrics. They cause the page to slow down. And so why would anything that we add to a page, which would significantly decrease the bottom line usability of the page, provide any sort of a long-term or even short-term ranking benefit? Now, I know that Google has recommended that they want us to embed these web stories. I think that it is incredibly terrible advice, and I don't recommend it. If you want to link to your web story, fantastic, but I wouldn't get into the habit of embedding them in posts.
I would add to that though, unless it adds value to your reader, right?
Yeah.
And that's my answer for everything I know, but that's the key. If like what Pinch of Yum is doing, she's sort of embedding how-to videos step by step. I think we talked about this last time, and you all know I hate web stories, but the way she's doing it is really good. And so that's actually like interactive process shots. So if you can build them in a way that actually adds value, that might not directly increase your ranking, but if you're creating better content, your ranking is going to go up. So there you go.
Yeah, Carrie's really good. We appreciate your commentary, Carrie. That web stories and guided recipes can take a short walk off a long pier and be on their way. We get it. Tell us how you really feel. It's all good.
Don't hold anything back.
Yeah, please. It's a safe space. Casey, is it true that you should no follow internal links to your own content?
Absolutely not. That is a myth. That is definitely not what we want to do. We like to have link juice, as Arson likes to call it, in his quiet times alone, when it's just him and his links.
Moist link juice.
Moist links.
When you're leaking link juice.
Because we don't do that. It destroys the flow of page rank through our site. When we no follow a link, there's no page rank going through that link.
Right.
And it doesn't go magically to other links on the page. That's not how it works. You've lost it. So if you're going to link internally, we should always be following those links. This is also why if we have a lot of links on a page and they're going nowhere or they're duplicated, then maybe we do some kind of a navigational audit, topical analysis to see if there's any unnecessary dilution of signals going on internally in the site. This is something that a lot of SEOs and a lot of these fly-by-night audits that unfortunately I know many of you on the call have experienced don't touch because they don't know anything about it. And so when we're actually doing an analysis or we're looking at an audit, we're looking at the flow of page rank through the site. We're looking at if there's any topical confusion or dilution happening. If I've no indexed all my tag pages, but I'm linking to 5 to 10 tag pages on every page, that's not good. I'm sending all that.
It's a confusing signal, right?
I'm sending all that page rank to posts that I have no indexed or no followed, and we don't want to do that. We just remove those links completely from the page so we can recover that page rank and have it flow back to other posts and other links on the page that have value to our users and to our site as a whole.
In the past, this used to be a thing that you would do back in the day. In case you remembers this was a part of a crawl budget optimization strategy where you were like, oh, I don't want Google to crawl through these pages. I'm going to use a new index. What it does in turn is it creates what I believe is a confusing signal for Google. Why are you no indexing a discoverability path to pieces of content on your site, right? No following or no indexing. No follow on those pages is kind of confusing for Google, because Google's going to look at it and like, what's the point of this, right? You shouldn't care about crawl budget optimization at this point. None of you have sites that are like gazillions of pages deep. You're not like Huffington Post or Forbes, where you have to worry about crawl budget optimization. Google will crawl through the pages and pick up everything that it needs. It's not going to give up on you. So definitely, this is a tactic that's old and outdated and should not be used anymore.
Okay. Andrew, is it true that server location makes a difference as to what results are displayed in the SERPs?
False. Google doesn't care where your server is. One caveat to that, though, is server distance to the visitor makes a difference on speed. So if you've got a server in Chicago and your visitor is in Sydney, Australia, it's going to add some time for all that data to go back and forth. So you do want to be cognitive and careful of server location, and really ideally set your server up closest to the center of where most of your users are. So for most of you, that's probably the US, and then use a content distribution network to make it faster for everywhere else. But it won't, Google's not going to change the content or change your ranking based on your server location. Where you are also will affect your search results, though. So they do it does flip around the other way. If you're in Canada searching for potato soup versus being in, I don't know, Sherman Oaks next door to Arson searching for potato soup, then you may get a slightly different search result based on the weather or whatever other people in that area of the world are searching for. So they will tailor it to you based on your geography.
The sunny weather of Sherman Oaks.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. Speaking of arson,
the cold potato soup recipes for arson. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
I love potato soup.
Is having an XML sitemap okay? Will having an XML sitemap boost your search rankings? That really threw me off there.
No, false. A sitemap is not a ranking factor. It helps Google discover pages on your website. But Google will most likely discover these pages whether you like it or not. So it's not necessarily a ranking factor. Having a sitemap is not going to help you rank. Having a sitemap helps Google discover pages that it might maybe have a hard time discovering. So you might have like a page that you're not linking to, so Google can't find a path to it, but you have it in your sitemap and Google will discover it. Now, not linking to a specific page might make it seem like it's an orphan page, and that page might have a hard time ranking on its own. So just having it in your sitemap obviously will not help it rank. So the answer is false. It's not true.
Okay. And we have 1, 2, 3 more. I know there's a ton of questions over in the Q&A. So if you haven't put in your question, definitely go ahead and do it now. As always, if we don't get to all of the questions, which it's a lot, we probably won't get to all of them, we do go through and answer every single one individually and publish them in the recap. So if you have a burning question that you want to ask these guys, definitely get it over into the Q&A. But for now, I would say this was probably the second most commonly asked one when people submitted questions. And Casey, this one goes to you. Are social media signals a ranking factor?
Myth, not remotely true. And the reason that social media signals are not ranking factors is that they're too muddy and they're too easily to manipulate. And this has been the case for years. I could literally go out right now to fiverr.com and buy 100,000 pens to go anywhere I want, or I could buy 10,000 Facebook shares, or I could purchase 14,000 retweets. Because of that, there's no way to really monitor authenticity of those signals. Social signals are a way for you to kind of allow the easier dissemination of your content. And they show some examples of social proof. In other words, social proof if something is popular, and we see a lot of social signals on that. There's an actual psychological condition where like, oh my gosh, this is being shared a lot. I am going to share that as well. Okay, but that's it. There is no ranking benefit at all for social signals, and you should run far, far away from any SEO or SEO course that says otherwise.
So 1,000 shares on Instagram does not matter.
No.
Bummer. Arson. You should use the disavow file only if you have a penalty by Google. True or false?
Partially true.
Do tell.
Yeah, so if you've been penalized by Google, depending on what you've been penalized for, if it is links, then obviously you should clean up. First, make an attempt, a few attempts at cleaning up whatever crappy links you built, and then submit a disavow file and a reconsideration request. You shouldn't be using a disavow file for all Google penalties. So that's like the first part of that. The second part of that, you should not be using the disavow file at all unless you really need to use it, right? It should not be used as a prophylactic. It should not be like, oh, I found some bad links and I'm going to throw them in my disavow file. It should also not be used because you got an email from SEMrush, like they like to be called now.
Hey, it's now SEMrush.
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 It's always going to be SEMrush to us, always.
Always.
So you got an email, and I'm not a fan of the verbiage they use, the word that they use. Toxic, right? Toxic is a very bad way of explaining that, and for somebody who is not as knowledgeable in SEO, that's a very like strict word that will cause a lot of confusion and panic, right? If you've been affected by an update and you've checked all the boxes, so you've had an audit with me or with Casey, and we arrived at the fact that, hey, your links are really at the cause of this, only at this point you would use the disavow file submission. And that file should be put together by somebody who knows what they're doing, because this is something that's super dangerous. You might accidentally disavow a domain level or page level, something that you really are depending on for certain rankings, right? Something that's a good signal for you. So I don't recommend using a disavow file. We've stopped recommending disavow files for like a few years now as a part of our audits, unless we do the forensics and we arrive at the fact that, yeah, this is like, we did a deep dive into your links. We didn't just use a tool to tell us that there is a toxic link, right? We actually just today looked at a toxic link report, and I saw these sites are relevant. These sites are relevant. They're not, the SEMrush algorithmically said that they are toxic, but that's because like they might not have an HTTPS on it, but it's not toxic, right? It's a relevant site. It has a relevant content, and it's linking to you because it makes sense. So stay away from using disavow file. You might hurt you will most likely hurt yourself than help yourself with the disavow file. Casey has stuff to say on this too.
Let me unmute myself. Thank you very much. The disavow file is something that we get a lot of questions about. And again, when someone signs up for an audit, I know there's several month delay, and sometimes I'll just receive notification, so-and-so has updated their disavow file. And I will just immediately shoot off an email and saying, why are you doing a disavow file? And they say, well, because I'm using SEMrush, told me I had toxic links. We just don't recommend that. If you have toxic links, Google's doing a very good job of determining and ignoring those links at their end. Per Google, the only 2 times you should ever be using a disavow file are, number 1, you built those bad links yourself and you know they're bad. You paid for them, they're not related to you, they're spammy, something along those lines. The second reason would be if you have an actual manual links penalty. If those 2 requirements do not fit with your current situation, you should be deleting that disavow file and never touching it again. That's honestly what you want to do, and that's what Google wants you to do, and that's directly from John Mueller.
Right. There was somebody was talking about a while back, like you're essentially disavow file is like going in with a scalpel instead of going in with a machete, right? You want to be very specific about what you want to disavow, right? Do you want to disavow this entire domain? Do you want to disavow just this one page on the domain? You need to know what you're doing, and you need to really be able to understand all the inner workings of what this link is and why this link is there and all of that. Just because it has like it slowly loads, or their security, their HTTPS certificate expired and they just forgot to renew it like for 2 days, right? That's not a toxic link.
Okay, perfect. The very last true or false is a little bit different. It's actually fiction or bacon, and this is for Casey. Someone wrote that Casey recommends Yoast duplicate post over Revision Manager TMC. Is that fiction or is that bacon?
I would say it depends. It's my first time. Is that my first time today?
Wow, another tally mark.
Am I in the group?
Twice.
Am I in the group? Twice?
Right.
The reason I started recommending Yoast duplicate posts, and I do recommend that plugin, is because I kept getting so many emails from people saying that Revision Manager was causing problems. Andrew knows what I'm talking about. It's cloning posts, or the post would not publish or whatever. And every time I would try to replicate it, I couldn't. So I think it was just maybe sometimes it was user error, sometimes it wasn't. If you're comfortable using Revision Manager, TMC, or Revisionize, and you're not having any problems, keep using them. But if you're looking for something else that is maintained and actually does work pretty well, then I would recommend the Yoast duplicate post plugin. Please read the tutorial, okay? Go in, find out how the tool works, understand it's very similar. The best thing that you want to do is you want to clone and republish. There's a specific thing, clone and republish. That's the link that you have to start hitting to make sure that we don't necessarily just start duplicating posts needlessly. And again, if you don't like how it works, then you just delete the post and you delete the plugin and you delete the duplicated post and you move on. All good.
Perfect. Okay, we are officially opening up to Q&A. We don't have a ton of time, but we're going to try to get to as many as we possibly can. First one is from Abigail, and any panelists, please feel free to jump in and address this. Question is, if we use a recipe card create with recipe schema for a post, is it okay to also use an FAQ block, either the Gutenberg FAQ block or the Yoast FAQ block? Is that okay for SEO purposes?
Yes. However, I want to make sure that I clarify that I would always prefer that you use the Yoast SEO FAQ block if you can. I find that the Gutenberg block just doesn't look as good, and sometimes for some reason it doesn't validate. Now, there has been some confusion as to whether you can use FAQ in a recipe post. Let me clear up the confusion. You're good. FAQ is built with itemless schema. You can use itemless schema with recipe schema, just like you can use aggregate rating schema, just like you can use breadcrumb schema, just like you can use other schemas on the page. The only time Google has really said, hey, you can't use these two schemas together are recipe and how to. So understand that.
Okay. Next question from Tammy. How far ahead of a holiday or season should you post a recipe for Google to rank that post? Is there a specific time frame?
It really depends on how long it's taking Google to crawl your content. I mean, in most cases, and please have someone else jump in here, but we've had audits where content's being indexed in minutes. Sometimes it's days, sometimes it's weeks. Do I think that you need to start publishing? Well, let's use one of my favorite holidays, which is of course Cinco de Mayo, obviously. And do I need to start publishing my Cinco de Mayo content?
Not expecting that to be your favorite holiday.
Was that no Cinco de Mayo?
That just like yeah.
I want to keep you on your toes. Keep you on your toes.
Thank you.
Would I need to publish my Cinco de Mayo content now? No, I could publish that towards the in April, and I'd be totally fine. Yeah. Right. Totally fine. But yeah, I know there used to be a thing where you had to start updating and republishing your seasonal content 3-4 months in advance. Not with the way Google is indexing and republishing, not with the way that Google is indexing updates and re-indexing content. Much, much faster now. You just don't need to do that. So as soon as you can, but whatever.
We should also mention that just because you published it doesn't mean it's going to rank, right? So if the question is how long in advance should I publish my post for it to give it a good chance to rank, you definitely want to give it some time, especially if you're publishing
if it's a completely new post,
right, completely new post, and you're publishing for like a very competitive holiday like Thanksgiving dinner, right? You definitely want to give enough time so you can build up some authority, get some links, and all of that stuff.
I think there's also thinking about your readers again. Would it make sense for you to publish a Cinco de Mayo recipe now in February? No. Right. So if you're sending your posts out to your readers when you publish, also you got to think about that. So think about when they start planning for these meals. Like Thanksgiving, people are going to be planning probably much further in advance and trying to score the best turkey they can, 2-3 weeks early, versus some of these other ones where they're going to be Googling recipes the day of or the day before.
And that's an extremely good point. I think a lot of this comes down to the fact that how Pinterest used to work is that you literally had to publish content 6 months in advance to have a chance of that content and the pins doing well on Pinterest so far in advance. That's changed now. We don't want to do Pinterest first on strategy. And I think that's where a lot of bloggers get confused. I want to try to optimize for Pinterest, but they understand that by doing that and publishing all this content earlier, there's a mismatch between the intent right now of the content when it goes live and your existing audience visiting your site. I don't want to read a Thanksgiving post in August. And yet that's what Pinterest would like you to do, is start publishing more updating content that early so that it has a better chance of doing well on Pinterest.
And I like Chelsea's to publish now and then email out right before the holiday to keep it fresh for all of your readers and subscribers as well. It's a great tip.
Right.
All right, we have 2 more questions. Second to last is from Judy, and this is an absolutely amazing question, and I would love to hear the answer from you guys as well. If multiple recipes on my site uses same phrase such as sauteed onions over medium-high heat, is that duplicate content?
No.
No, I mean, it's basically shared content, and that's a little bit different. I mean, the thing is that Google understands that not everything can be unique, but also you have to understand that the surrounding copy changes the intent of shared phrases. I could literally repeat on one page, Casey's awesome and loves bacon 20 times. It's not duplicate because it's on one page, but I'm not going to rank much for anything other than Casey's awesome and loves bacon. It's just like if I put one sentence for the onions on multiple other posts, I've surrounded that statement with hundreds of other words of unique content. So that's why you should never really worry about these these little bits of shared content. There's a plugin, not a plugin, my mistake. There's a site called Citeliner, citeliner.com. I'll have Ashley paste that over there for me. And it is basically just a forensic tool that will allow you to crawl your entire site and see shared content. If you want to be concerned about shared content, make sure that you run that and then look at things like 75%, 80%, 90% shared content. That's where you need to be concerned. But when you see things like 5%, 10%, maybe even 20 or 25, not a big deal. Okay. That's just how the internet works.
Right. It's all about that saturation, right? So as long as you don't oversaturate, you're good.
Perfect. Okay. And the final question, I'm sorry that we didn't get to all of the questions, but don't worry. Once again, they will all be answered individually by these experts. Yep. So they will all be taken care of. Kelly, this is a great question and good for clarification. I thought in the last webinar, it was mentioned not to add tags anymore. I saw somebody today say that we should. So
No.
Should we have tags, or can we clarify that?
Maybe there was a misspoke, but we don't recommend adding tags if you're not already using tags. If you're using tags, the very first thing you need to do is go into your search console and see if those tag pages are actually generating traffic. In most cases, they're not. And so we tend to not recommend the use of tags. We would no index that. Once we've no indexed something, we tend to remove it from displaying on the site so we don't waste link juice.
Right.
I just squeezed that in there, didn't you?
Oh, Arson's cringe face.
You're gonna love it. I loved it. So yeah, we appreciate. We'll definitely clarify that.
Right.
We're not
so
team tags.
I was the one who said it. So I was talking about multiple categories for
Right.
each post, and I said that with tags you can, if you're no indexing them, right, like you can as many as you want. That doesn't make sense to optimize that.
All right.
Perfect. Okay. Well, that wraps up our 8th episode. I am pasting in a link for next month's episode, which is going to be on St. Patrick's Day. I'm extremely excited.
We will all have, I don't know how we're going to do it, but we're all going to have green beer.
I want to see everybody start publishing the green beer recipes right now.
Green beer recipes right now. We're going to make our own green beer, whatever. And we need to make sure we'll be able to have that recipe to pull up on the screen here.
Yep, that's definitely necessary. So it's going to be March 17th at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We're going to do a little bit earlier and see how that works for everyone. The link's in there. Please make sure you register and keep a lookout in your email next week for the recap blog post with this replay and all of the Q&A as well as the transcript. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, attendees. Thank you, everybody, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Be safe out there.
Bye.